Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is the next installment in my brand new series. As ever, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story, entitled The Backpack Off the Trail, Part 2. Let's get straight into that. Within the hour, we had packed up camp and set course for a day's hiking further into the wilderness. They aimed to find a nicer spot to fish and camp for a few nights before we moved on. And believe me, I did protest. I flat out refused to move any further than in the other direction. I was met with a few head shakes, and the others had the same unsure but equally worried expression across their faces. I sighed aloud, eventually picked up my backpack and the old one I had discovered the day before. I was sure there were more answers and such hidden inside the backpack's other compartments. I would take a look as soon as we find our campsite, but what we found only served more questions than answers. After a long and sweaty, sticky hike deeper into the swampland, we came to a large clearing with a large creek winding its way through the land. A couple of good eddies over the other side of the creek raised spirits slightly for everyone else, as the others seemingly forgot the morning's events. We decided this was a great spot to stop for a few days, and so the others and I began setting up the camp and a new fire pit. All the while, the sense of us being followed and now watched grew even more tangible. I could feel the hatred of the wild killing machine's eyes burning into the back of my head. Every now and then I would turn on the spot, trying to catch a glimpse of our ferocious stalker, just so I could prove to everyone what I had seen the night before was in fact very real, and we were on its menu. The hot and humid day waned on for what seemed only a few hours as I was lost in a blur of worry and paranoia. Danny, Jim and Stacy all kept checking their six, as if they too were feeling the same impending threat that swelled in size as the hours ticked by and nighttime crept its way in. Well, this time, I wanted the fire to be double the size we had the night before. I had hoped it would keep it back or completely deter it entirely. What a fool I was. As the fingers of darkness soon slithered their way around the camp and into the iron vice-like grip of suspense and doom, not a cricket could be heard, and we still hadn't seen any animals to speak of. There was, however, a good number of decomposing carcasses dotted here and there as we made our way to the new campsite. They were miles apart, but all were clearly a brutal kill. Eventually, we sat around the fire, talking and drinking and smoking and generally shooting the shit. Myself and Jim, Danny as well as Stacy, all remained alert, and we hardly touched the alcohol compared to the night before. I watched Jim's and Danny's eyes darting left to right as Stacy displayed the same nervous bunny in the headlights look. I then decided that now we were all a bit more mellow to take a look at the rest of the backpack. After all, I had carried it for miles all day, and it was pretty heavy. And so, with everyone's attention drawn to the backpack, I opened the second compartment, and I was immediately baffled by what I saw. I reached in, pulled out about 5 or 6 wallets and purses. There was plenty more inside the compartment. Intrigued but also alarmed at the second find, I began looking through the collection of personal identifications and membership cards for Target stores. And what was more puzzling was that the identification and store cards were from 4 different states. At a glance, I hazarded there to be over 50 such wallets and purses. Now whoever this belonged to had been up to no good whatsoever. I mean, why would somebody steal these items and keep them all together in one place? Unless this was an attempt to dump mass evidence. The items before me didn't sit right. I mean, it didn't feel like this was a petty criminal dumping his used loot. No, this felt sinister somehow. Why would a petty criminal trek all the way out here in this hostile, maze-like wilderness just to dump a cache of stolen identification? Perhaps we could try Googling some of the names, if we can get a reception out here, of course, Stacy said as she flipped her way through a stack of cards. Jim and Danny tried their phones, but, as expected out that far, we had zero signal, and it would likely take more than a day of hard hiking to get anywhere close to a signal to Google names and such. I don't like this one bit, guys. Something's not right about this place. Maybe the old timers in town were right. Maybe we should turn around and head for the ATVs, yeah? I asked, nodding my head enthusiastically. Yeah, I really don't like this either. It's pretty creepy, to be honest, Kathy added, moving closer to me and taking my arm in hers. Oh, come on, cried Louise, and David scoffed aloud as he chucked his empty beer bottle onto the fire with an audible sizzle. Look, I believe what them old-timers were saying about the boogers and such, but this bag of old crap that some crackhead probably dumped generations ago, that means nothing, Dave scolded drunkenly. As for Michael here and his little charade this morning, pfft, he added with phlegm flying from his mouth. Now hang on just a minute, I went to say, and was cut short by Louise as she waved her finger in my face in a full-on Karen moment. No, you listen here, Mike. All you ever do is complain and make this worse for everyone, huh? Well, that's why your first wife left you after all, isn't it? She spat at me with a slurred fury. Whatever to the both of you. I can't stand being around your twisted mind games. You think this is normal? The old timers told you, Dave. They told you this swamp was cursed, and you even grilled our asses about it. You do remember that, right? I countered, the both of them glaring at Dave in the eye as I did so. He puffed his chest out like a prize cockerel and said straight as an arrow, that's different, Michael, and you know it. I said boogers and such, not whatever bullshit you're trying to spin here for your own kicks. What, a werewolf? A wolfman? Oh, that's too far for your mind to grasp, but Bigfoot and such aren't? I laughed at him as he lost his train of thought and just gruffed a heavy sigh back at me. Look, believe what you want to believe, but we all see the prints this morning, and I have nothing to do with it. I trailed off feeling that we were ruining the trip if this continued, plus it was getting us nowhere fast. The three of us decided to just not talk to each other for the remainder of the night, and while the rest of us slowly went through the identifications to see of any names or if they rung any bells, Louise and Dave chose to keep drinking and chat between themselves. Eventually, however, the night drew to a close, and the others were all content to sleep once more. I tried to suggest a pair of us should keep watch, but was shot down by Dave and Louise as being immature and quit being such a pussy, Louise squawked at me. They both decided to turn in for the night, and as I and the others shared one last joint before doing the same. I knew I wasn't going to sleep, but I sure as hell wasn't going to sit outside all by myself. Jim and Danny and Stacy all wanted to take shelter in their tent too. Jim had calmed considerably, and obviously they were tired from a hard day's hiking, and so I settled down as best I could given her circumstances, trying to keep a cool head in the searing, hot, humid swamp. Around 2 a.m. this time, I heard it. Slowly at first, I heard those telltale heavy thumps of its footfalls, the wheezy, cavernous breaths it took, and the now familiar repugnant stench of death and feces. I had slowly stalked the campsite for another 5 minutes or so. All the while, I was sure the beast would hear my beating heart as it thumped in my chest. As I sat there, half ready to draw the zipper down and half wanting to curl up into a ball like a small frightened child, it then grunted sharply, as if something else had caught its attention. I stopped breathing. I held my breath as my mind raced 1,000,000 miles an hour, and quietly and barely noticeable, given my own heart's maddening beats, there came a light spritzing or spraying sound. As my eyes widened to the alien sound in the vast, darkened expanse of the swamp, it dawned on me at the last second, before all hell seemed to break loose. David and Louise! My mind screamed at me. One of them must have woken up to spray some more bug repellent before trying to get back to sleep once more. As if the very second this realization came to light, I heard it take 3 quick strides over to the opposite side of the camp and away from myself and Danny's tent. I paused for a few seconds. Then, without a second to react, it slashed into David and Louise's tent with such ferocity and brutality that the entire tent was stripped away in seconds. David sat bolt upright as Louise was already sat up, with her bug spray still in hand, as the Wolfman met her face to face, eye to eye. An enormous and sinister rumbling growl added the icicles that had crept their way through my body. As David went to grab his sidearm, I drew the tent zipper down and burst from my own tent, gun drawn and nervously panting for breath. The beast had already made its move in the mere seconds I transitioned from her own tent and held a squirming Louise by her head in one mighty deformed hand and claws. I quickly grabbed a bunch of kindling and sticks and threw them onto the fire to hopefully scare this thing back, or at least give us some light to see it and take aim. Now, in the light of the growing but still pathetic fire, I could make out this abomination, and what stood before me was nothing short of otherworldly. The coarse but long strands of greasy hair were as dark as night itself. It had an iridescent sheen that caught the slithers of moonlight that broke through the thick vegetation and canopy of vines and cypress trees above us. As it turned to look at my intrusion, David screamed and let loose a barrage of shots to its head with his Ruger .38. I found its mark as I could see its cheek and lower jawbone blown away from the nightmare's head. But this only seemed to enrage the Wolfman more, as it roared so loud that I had to cover my ears to stop them from bursting. At this point, my mind went into auto-defense, and I too let loose a 4-round burst at the centre mass of its back, aiming just off to the left and hoping a good lump of lead to the heart would be enough to put this thing down. But as I let fly my own volley of hellfire at this ravenous creature, I backhanded David like a bitch, sending him sprawling out of his sleeping bag and into the base of a thick cypress tree, his head making a wet smack against its hard and unforgiving surface. And then, like a ragdoll, I watched his lifeless body crumple in a heap, ass up. It turned to me in a gravelly growling spin, still with Louise, who was screaming for us to help her, to "Get this thing off of me!" she cried pitifully as tears streamed down her face. Her hair clung to her cheeks as she sobbed, unable to change what was about to happen. The beast took a step towards me, and I fired my Glock 20 10mm with 220 grain buffalo bore rounds and grabbed for a large log that glowed red at one end. It stepped towards me again, and I swung the red-hot log at the beast's head, causing its skin and hair to sizzle. Sparks flew up into the air as the beast groaned, his eyes reflecting a terrifying, fiery red glow. And then, before I or anyone could react, the Wolfman jumped with Louise still held firmly by her skull, up into the tree's canopy and off deeper into the swamp. Her screams for help could be heard in a silent swamp for what felt like hours after they were gone. Now the others, obviously now wide awake, all sprung from their own tents, eyes wide as they too heard the pitiful cries for help, wailing into the night like a wounded doe. As each of them turned to me, and then to Dave's crumpled unconscious but not dead body at the base of the tree, a mighty and all-harrowing howl shattered the silence of the swamp. The wailing cries of Louise was all that could be heard, getting further and further away from us into the dark, dank and deadly darkness of Bond Swamp, Georgia. The Wolfman was just getting started in this nightmare that would lead us deeper and deeper into the swampland, playing right into the sick game of wolf and mouse he had always dreamt would happen. A group of dim-wit young'uns would waltz straight into the jaws of the beast.